Section number 1, we need to find out why some people support regulating guns. In 1934, Attorney General Homer S. Cummings gave a testimony to House Committee on Ways and Means during the hearings on House Resolution 9006, during which he said, before we read what he said, it's important that we talk about who he was real quick. He was the Attorney General of the United States. The Attorney General is the head lawyer, head attorney for the United States of America. So it's going to be his job to form cases and important court cases. So he might be involved in the prosecution of criminals. So when we think about it, his main goal is going to be his interactions with people who have broken the law, not necessarily upholding the law for law-abiding citizens. Here's Mr. Cummings. So how did he describe the situation related to gun control? He said, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, this bill is designed to enable the Department of Justice to deal with what I think is generally recognized as a very serious national emergency. So this is going to help him deal with the situation. The development of late years of the predatory criminal has created a situation which is giving concern to all who are interested in law and order. I am prepared to say there are at least 500,000 of these people who are warring against society with weapons of the most deadly character. Now, to deal with that situation, of course, requires thought and study. The amount of public interest in this effort to suppress crime is astounding. If the general public wants gun control, should the United States government work on gun control? Now we have established in our department an organization to concentrate on a program that is constitutional, that is reasonable. At the same time, we have endeavored to provide the means of meeting this very real problem. I do not know exactly how this bill will work out. Nobody can tell. We must feel our way through these big problems. A sawed-off shotgun is the most dangerous and deadly weapons. A machine gun, of course, ought never to be in the hands of any private individual. There is not the slightest excuse for it, not the least in the world. And we must, if we are going to be successful in this effort to suppress crime in America, take these machine guns out of the hands of the criminal class. Let's think about what Mr. Cummings said here. He talked about the fact that these are dangerous weapons. He talked about the fact that this is a very deadly situation. He described the people who are using these weapons as criminals. So this is a very real problem. So how does he describe what the guns have done in America? And does that give him a good enough reason for us to regulate them in some form? After you've highlighted the text, you need to summarize what you chose to highlight. And then we also need to talk about his bias. Fill in what's in the parentheses here. We should note the person who said this was, in this case, Attorney General. And this matters because their bias may have been, what did I say before we read, after looking at his biography? What is his main concern? Even when he said, and here, designed to enable the Department of Justice to deal with what I think is generally recognized as a very serious national emergency. He wants legal tools that will help him prosecute criminals. So he's going to be in favor of catching people who've committed crimes rather than standing up for the people who have not. This evidence matters for today's debate over increasing gun restrictions because some people still believe what? Why is this related to Joe Biden's plan to control gun control? If we consider who has been described as the problems and how they describe the guns, does that sound at all like what Joe Biden said? All right, for our second piece of evidence in this section, we're not going to look at a cartoon. We're going to look at this graphic here. There was a chart of homicide statistics shown to members of Congress. This is a comparison between the number of homicides in the United States and other countries such as France, Germany, Great Britain. Let's look at the numbers. For 3 years, for the time period from 1920 to 1931, America had 107,145 homicides. It doesn't specify how many of those were from a gun, but this is a lot of homicides, especially if we compare that to France, who only had 5,343, or Germany, that had 17,204, or Great Britain, 3,430. All of these other civilized first world nations. Italy had 16,646. Look at this, just alone, New York had over 4,500. That's more than all of Great Britain. Why would this, what's the main idea of this chart? What's happening in America compared to other countries? And if we were to connect that evidence to today's debate over gun control in the United States, do some people still compare the United States and the number of mass shootings to other countries? Is our number high? Okay, supporting question number 2. Why do some oppose the United States government regulating guns? We're going to read a statement by NRA President Carl T. Frederick. Remember that the NRA is the National Rifle Association. The National Rifle Association, he'll mention in the speech, is an organization for gun owners. We'll need to talk about why that would matter when we discuss his bias. Mr. Frederick said, "This bill, practically speaking, destroys the business in firearms of 95% of the dealers. Should we do something if it's going to hurt businesses? The practical result of this bill will be that the countryman will be unable to secure a weapon that he needs for his own defense and the defense of his home and family. In my opinion, results which can be accomplished by firearms legislation are extremely limited." Do people say we shouldn't pass gun control laws because those gun control laws won't work? This is an important line. "I think that under the Constitution, the United States has no jurisdiction to legislate in a police sense with respect to firearms." Why do we have no jurisdiction? Why does the United States not have the legal authority to do this? Think about the Second Amendment. "I think that is exclusively a matter for state regulation. Automobiles are a much more essential instrument of crime than pistols. Any police officer will tell you that. They are much more dangerous to ordinary life because they kill approximately 30,000 people a year." This is an interesting idea. The idea that we shouldn't regulate firearms because firearms are not as deadly as other things. Have you ever heard anyone still say this today? "I am president of the National Rifle Association, and I think I correctly voice its views. I am just as much against the gangster as any man, but I am just as much interested in seeing him suppressed. But I do not believe that we should burn down the barn in order to destroy the rats. I am in favor of some more skillful method of getting the rats without destroying the barn. In my opinion, most of the proposals, the regulation of firearms, do not reach the crook at all, but they do reach the honest man. Will these laws stop criminals, or will they just take away guns from the average American?" This whole talk about the barn is kind of interesting. So he doesn't want to burn down the barn. He says that there are rats in the barns. But what is this barn? When I read this, I wonder if he's talking about the Second Amendment. If the Second Amendment is the barn and the rats are the quote, criminals, should we get rid of the Second Amendment Should we get rid of the barn just because there's some rats? Is that justification enough for taking away a whole amendment? If you cannot keep guns out of the hands of criminals in jails, I do not see how you can keep them out of the hands of criminals. The National Rifle Association is organized for the purpose of promoting small arms practice. It is composed of individual members and of affiliate groups, that is, shooting clubs, etc. Our membership runs into the hundreds of thousands all over the country. So the NRA is the organization that promotes firearms and is comprised or made up of Americans who own guns. Why would that lead to him having a bias in his discussion of gun control? After you have summarized his main ideas, which you highlighted in the quote, you need to tell me that we should note that the person who said this was the president of the NRA, and then tell me what his bias might be. Lastly, tell me why that evidence matters for today's debate over increasing gun restrictions, because some people still think about what was asked of Joe Biden in the news clip by Mr. Cooper. What is a fear many gun owners have about gun control? And then we are going to look at this advertisement for the Thompson machine gun. This advertisement was run by a gun dealer named E. Richardson, a gun distributor. How does he describe the Thompson gun? Here's the gun that bandits fear most, the Thompson anti-bandit gun. Be ready for any emergency. All of these reasons here why he thinks this gun is a safe gun and why this gun is a good gun for police officers. That's why bandits surrender to the man with the Thompson gun. They know there's no getaway against the Thompson. Look at all these police agencies that use the Thompson gun. So why does this matter? Why do some people think they need these guns? Do they think it's for protection? Do they think these guns keep them safe? Why would that matter for today's debate? What do some people still think about these guns? All right. Okay, put yourself in the shoes of a member of Congress. We're debating gun control. We've got what was described by the Attorney General as a very serious emergency. As a result of this debate, there were some amendments made to the law that was passed and became known as the National Firearms Act of 1934. Why did they choose to pass this legislation? Was it because of the extreme crime that was being committed by gangsters? Think back to that question focused document at the very start, that news headline from the 1930s, the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. So what happens over time is we have the government seeing a violent episode of gun-related violence, and that leads to the government passing some sort of restriction, and that happens again and again. First, 1939, the NFA made it to the Supreme Court, and they upheld the ban on sawed-off shotguns, implying that the Founding Fathers adopted the amendment to ensure the then new federal government did not disarm state militias, saying that there's a difference between someone who wants to own a sawed-off shotgun and someone who's in a state militia. They said a sawed-off shotgun is not needed for a militia, would not be protected for a militia. Skip all the way to 1968, Congress passed the Gun Control Act. The law called for better control of interstate traffic of firearms. This was because Lee Harvey Oswald had used a mail-order gun to assassinate President John F. Kennedy. This is another example of Congress seeing a tragedy related to guns and passing gun control. Because of crime in their city, the DC City Council bars residents from owning handguns. Keep in mind it's 1976. It's going to matter down here in 2008. In 1986, the Firearm Owners Protection Act is approved by Congress. It prohibited felons from owning or possessing guns or ammunition. The Law Enforcement Officers Act is also passed. It prohibits the manufacturing, importing, and selling of ammunition that can penetrate a bulletproof vest. Police officers were getting killed with this ammunition, so they made it illegal. In 1993, Congress passes the Brady Handgun Violence Act, establishing the National Instant Criminal Background Check System. You may have heard about this when someone's talking about purchasing a gun. In order to buy a gun, you have to have your background checked. Gun dealers are used to before selling a gun. The law is named after former White House Press Secretary James Brady, who was shot in the head during the 1981 assassination attempt on President Ronald Reagan. President Ronald Reagan was shot and was wounded, but he survived. Unfortunately, James Brady did not. In 1994, in reaction to gun violence, the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act becomes law. The law banned the manufacture, use, possession, and import of 19 types of assault weapons, including AK-47s and Uzis. The law expired in 2004. This is the one that was mentioned in the video with Joe Biden. All the way to 2007. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia rules in favor of Dick Anthony Heller, 66, an armed security guard, who sues the district after it rejects his application to keep a handgun in his home in Capitol Hill. District appeals to Supreme Court. In 2008, the Supreme Court upholds the lower court ruling, striking down the D.C. handgun ban as unconstitutional. This D.C. handgun ban had been in place since 1976, but in the Heller case, as it's now known, the Supreme Court says restrictions on those types of firearms are unconstitutional. So over time, we have a number of instances where there's a crisis related to guns. Congress tries to reform it, but throughout this time, the Supreme Court has upheld the Second Amendment and says gun restrictions can be considered unconstitutional. In 1939, they said this one is constitutional. In 2008, they said that one is not. All right, let's do a real quick compare and contrast the two debates. What is similar between the two policy debates? In the past, what were they doing? There was no ban on any guns. There was just a tax. It was a tax on guns due to violence from criminals, from gangsters, the mafia. Today, there is discussion of banning certain weapons. Those would be the assault-style rifles that are used in the mass shootings. So if in the past it was gangsters using the guns, today it is just mass shooters. So all of the similarity of gun control. Do you think you can use that past evidence to tell me whether or not we should support or oppose Joe Biden's plan to combat gun violence, specifically the assault rifle ban? Do you believe the evidence from the past provides a good case? If you have questions, please let me know.